Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is December 18th. Getting to feel a little like Christmas around here. This is the Daily AI Show. Welcome, everybody. It's Monday. Today, right now, at least, we got Jimmy, Andy, Beth, and I'm Brian. And yeah, today we were sort of just talking before the show saying, Andy was saying it's starting to definitely feel like Christmas. We were all talking about our weekends and all the things we have coming up and birthdays. And Jimmy, you were talking about birthdays and how that overlaps. And yeah, my daughter's delayed birthday party was this weekend and all that good fun stuff. So, but we have a fun week this week of all sorts of different AI topics. Today, want to talk a little bit about AI as it relates to business intelligence, or just BI. So this is an industry that I worked in for 2.5 years prior to working at Scaled, where I am now. So now I work for a sales consulting company. But prior to that, I was working with in business intelligence. And so what were we doing? I worked with very, very smart people who were like SQL, reps it, or SQL, certified. I can't think of the word I want, but anyway, they were going in and doing the data analysts. That's what I was trying to think of, data analysts. They were doing the analytics. They were building platforms. They were building complex, multi-source data source dashboards for companies and these kind of things. Some of it was connected through SQL. Some of it was big cloud databases, all data lakes, all this kind of stuff. They would connect to Snowflake. They would connect all this. So through that process, this is like, we're talking about 2017-ish, right? Even then, even though, obviously we've been talking about AI now a lot, and we started the show, obviously AI has been around for a long, long time. And I was even starting to see it there, where they were starting to put natural language into your dashboards. So if we can just rewind a little bit, one of the biggest issues that lots of companies were having was a couple of things. Number one, their data was siloed. Siloed meaning that what maybe the finance department was doing with data was completely separate from what marketing was doing. And so let's get Carl in here. Hey, Carl, welcome. So they were having data silo issues. And what we would often find out, we collectively, meaning my company and the people I worked with, would find out is that maybe finance had made this amazing dashboard or even just spreadsheet, and nobody else in the company would know it existed. But it actually solved a real problem. Like somebody in that department just said, well, hell, I'll build it, right? This would happen all the time, especially at large companies. Okay, so now you had started to have companies. I worked a lot with a company called Click, Q-L-I-K. If you're in data business intelligence, if you work with that, you know that company, Click and Click Sense. They used to go to massive conventions that were a part of that. They're a big, big deal. And so I was like certified with Click, but then I also worked with another company called ThoughtSpot. ThoughtSpot was one of the first that I remember, at least I worked with, where they basically created the search bar. Something we would seem totally normal today at the end of 2023. They were really doing in like 2018 in terms of, here's a dashboard, here's a lot of your data, but at the top, you can just start typing in what it is you're looking for. Very natural language processing, very much sort of like your chat GPT-ish, wasn't that intelligent, but chat GPT, where it could basically look like a chat bot on your data. It understood what the context of what you were looking for, and then it would just immediately create the charts in front of you. So if you would just say something like, you could talk to it, a lot of times it was typing, but you could say things like, I want to see our sales in this particular department for Q3 of 2023 compared to versus, right, Q3 of 2022 and 2021 for that matter. And as you typed it in, it would just start popping up the screen. Not unlike some of the tools we see at AI today, where it can create the image almost in real time. That's what it would do. And then depending on the data, it would allow you to also drill down into it as well. So I say all this is to sort of start off the conversation. What I want to do really quick is share a bit of my screen. Let me just get this situated so I can do that. Just to talk about some of the players that are out there today, how AI is coming into it. And then I just would love to open up the conversation to you guys about things that are going to come up, like data governance and data siloing and AI, and how is it just for these big companies, or now can smaller companies take advantage of this? Where can they take advantage of this? That kind of thing. So if we just look at some of the tools, and this first one, Beth, is right up your alley because it's Tableau. And Tableau is open, or I got to do the whole window here. Tableau is owned by Salesforce. Thank you. I was about to say Salesforce. So Tableau is one of the first ones. And if you kind of go through these websites, and I was interested as I was doing research on this over the weekend, a lot of them have AI in there now baked into it. Like AI is one of the first words that's in there a lot. So you're going to see it with Tableau, explore data, deliver insights, take action with Tableau AI. So now, they have this thing called Pulse, Tableau Pulse, and Einstein Copilot, and the ability to kind of dive in and drive into these dashboards more using AI. So when they talk about AI, it's not always talking about natural language processing. They may also be using it in a term like machine learning, where they're really more talking about the algorithms that can be built in the back end. And that's not always necessarily what we're talking about on this show, but it depends on the product and the service and what part they're talking about. But you can see it's a lot of, exploring data and trends in AI, obviously a huge deal. If we go over to Click, they now have this thing called Click Stage, questions you could be asking Click's AI. What do we expect our revenue to be in Q3 for each region? Again, this sort of natural language. I just tell you what I'm looking for, and you build the charts for me in real time that answer that question. What actions can we take to maximize revenue? So that's more predictive, prescriptive, right? Looking forward. Which inventory outages might occur next year? Things like this. So asking questions of your data. ThoughtSpot I talked about before, and you can, if you're looking at a screen, you can see, drive analyst productivity through the roof with AI, and you can actually see this little blurb that they're doing right now, where they're zooming in and doing an analyst of it. But at the beginning of this, they'll just show you literally typing into a search bar, and that was one of the first places. It might be higher up here. There you go. So typing into the search bars up here and then asking questions. Here you go. So most popular pets on the West Coast. Okay, so they're doing analysis for that particular company. It's just building it for you. And then you have some other ones.
For people who are listening to us, what he was doing was just on the ThoughtSpot.com page. So those are all different. Go there and see.
Absolutely. All things about ThoughtSpot. And this isn't a big part. This is sort of an overview of what's out there right now. Power BI by Microsoft, not my favorite in the world. It was always super, super annoying to work with, but a lot of companies use it because they're using Microsoft products. And you can even see now, I've got it on the screen, they're now building in Copilot. And in fact, when I went to the website, it said it's now in beta or preview. And if you're looking at their screen, if you're not on the side, there's a Copilot side window that's coming up next to the charts that's allowing you to basically ask these questions. And it's really tiny, but you can kind of see it's asking for data within a certain period of time, and you're able to ask more questions sort of using the Microsoft Copilot. Then you have tools like Looker, which are by Google, and that's actually now free. Looker was a standalone company, and Google bought them several years ago. And it was always kind of Looker, then it was Google Looker, and where was it going to go? But you can actually create reports right now in Looker for free, which I think is really cool. It doesn't really have all the AI pieces to it, but it's cool to know it's there. And if you're looking at a screen, what you're looking at is I built this in about 30 seconds, pulling in analytics and data from our YouTube channel for the Daily AI Show. And I can quickly go in and I can drill down here. So I can actually go drill down. And now I'm looking by dates on certain things, and just allows you to sort of dive into the data a little bit easier. And now it's making it even easier for people maybe who can't afford a ThoughtSpot, which I don't know what it costs now, but it was, multiple thousands, 20s, 10, 30s, 40s, $100,000. It was expensive. I don't know where they are now and what they're doing, but it was more for enterprise level. So all that to say, and I'm just going to bring this up last, and then we can just open up the conversation, is here's the deal. When I used to work with companies all the time, we would talk about their data, and we would talk about, okay, what can they do with their data? Well, even in 2017, 2018, as you imagine, not so much AI, but a lot of people were using the terms machine learning. If I use the Wayback Machine and I went back to a lot of these websites, I would imagine a lot of them would be saying machine learning, because that was the term that came up all the time. But for now, we can just look at this. And they would say, not to me necessarily, but, hey, Brian, man, we really, really want to get prescriptive analytics. And what were they saying about that? Well, they were saying, I would like the data in this platform to predict what we should do next. And then we would go dive into their data, and then we'd say, we hate to break it to you, but you can barely do descriptive. So let's talk about what that means really quick, and then you bring it up from there. So you have 4 levels, if you will, of data. So you have descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and then prescriptive. And they move in order of complexity and value from left to right. But most people's data isn't always clean enough, even these big enterprises, because of the siloed data, because of these issues that now AI is starting to help with. And so they could only really do descriptive, which is like, what just happened? What's happening live? Kind of like our YouTube analytics. What just happened? Okay, well, this show did well, and it did better, and it had a longer lead time, and it had more viewers, and they stayed on the show longer through the conversation. Okay, great. Then you have diagnostic, which gets into more like root cause analysis. It's more of the why it was happening, not just here's the data. Then you get into predictive, which is if you've got your house in order and you've got your data in order, you can start to get into like, well, why did that happen? Why was that happening? What can we do? How can we look back at historical data and now make decisions based on that? So you're really starting to move up the chain a little bit. And then if you finally get into more the AI side, that was the machine learning and the prescriptive, excuse me, where it's like future actions. It's actually predicting, or not predicting, it's prescribing what you should do next based off of your data. So I say all this, and this is sort of a long warm up, I know, but really where I feel like the conversation goes now is, okay, not that this is new, but we've had these business intelligence tools, building dashboards, allowing people to walk into meetings where the problem used to be, I've talked about this before, the problem used to be, oh, I walk into a meeting and I've done all the work, right? And I'm going to go into this executive meeting and I have all my dashboards ready. And what used to happen was I'd say slide 2. By slide 3, the executive in the room, CEO, the CFO, somebody like that goes, well, why is that like that? Shouldn't we be thinking about this? Guess what? A couple of years ago, that was the end of the conversation. The data analyst had to say, I'll go back and I'll create the reports to answer that question, and the meeting goes nowhere. Now you're able to dive directly into the data live. And so now when those conversations come up from the CFO or whatever, you can say, well, let's look at that really quick. And that's where AI is really starting to make the difference. But now what I'm seeing and what I predict in 2024 as we look at this is that's the big players. But now I think this stuff is going to start trickling down into your smaller businesses, your shops of 10 to 20. I think in short order, you're going to see your local mom and pop shops, your local restaurants being able to use AI and really dive into their specific data, even if it's not as big as enterprise. So that's kind of where I see like the state of the union, if you will, on where we are with AI. And then I would love to just hear from you guys, like, where do you see this going? Where do you see, as far as business intelligence goes, where do you see AI taking it? What's the next level of this for businesses?
So I will say that for HubSpot and Salesforce, which are the 2 main cloud-based CRMs that I'm aware of, a bunch of what you talked about has been available, right? So you were able to analyze the data that you were collecting. The challenge, I think, is data analysis literacy, right? In the same way that when we talk about IP law, there's a like general public understanding or misunderstanding of what IP law actually is. There's also a general public slightly misunderstanding about what feels like a predictive analysis, like this feels in our gut like the right idea, but misunderstanding the actual analytic process to get there. So I sort of feel that one of the challenges in this is data literacy more than data analysis, so that you're like understanding when something is off. You don't have to know how to do the statistics. You don't have to touch the formula at all. But you do want to be literate enough to know that you're collecting the right data and making sure that the right data is put in, and then what it means because the next level of this in 2024 is that predictive or prescriptive, becomes, hey, so this is what I prescribe as the next action. I've made a draft of it for you. Would you like to just hit send?
Yeah.
Right. And that's an agent. It's not like you really want a ton of understanding before you click send, which is really, really easy. So that's my thought.
Yeah. And if the data is wrong all the way at the beginning, then you're going to get prescriptive suggestions based off bad data. And if you don't know what you don't know, and the data literacy isn't there, you perhaps have problems down the road.
Right. And it's unlikely that somebody is going to be like, this is awful. I can't believe you sent me this email. But more like, this prescriptive thing is, it's not any better than us. Right.
Right.
It's not any better than my gut. And that's because the data was not predictive enough. And I've cut you off twice.
That's quite all right. I'll describe myself as a power user of BI. I was one of the very first customers of Looker. Looker's from Santa Cruz. Its headquarters are obviously now at Google, but it has its main office of the original staff here. And Lloyd Tabb, a personal acquaintance of mine, is the inventor of LookML, which is the sort of next generation language that generates SQL queries. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like to actually implement BI in an organization. And I want to focus first on the data organization. Most of the data is in different systems, like the ERP system for finance. It's in for an e-commerce oriented company, it's in your e-commerce platform, all the transaction data in there. And there's a couple of major dimensions that you want to look at when you're looking at sales intelligence. And then there's the customer segmentation, and the other one is the product segmentation. So you've got those major dimensions, but you want your BI system to have access to all of that information. So you're coupling together the CRM for segmentation and then the transaction system, where that is, in our case, it was Magento, to do the e-commerce and other customer ordering. Now, getting all of that to work with Looker or Tableau or anything else means you've got to first start to transport all of the data from all those systems into a single data store. And that is a SQL database in the case of Looker. So it's a SQL-oriented query generator, Looker is. And it's also, once you put all that together, you can do these beautiful visualizations in real time. In effect, you can just log into Looker and start to say, okay, what's the latest progression of data in this sales channel in this product? And I can graph that out, and I can send that around by email. I can schedule things that go out. I personally built, using Looker's, sort of business user oriented interface, with the assistance of a very, very talented SQL engineer who did all the data organization within my organization. And also, if I ran into trouble with the configuration of a look, then he would, come in and give me some guidance on that. And in some cases, Looker couldn't even do what I wanted to do easily. And so he would just generate the SQL queries directly and look at our data. So that's kind of the picture of who's working with those things. And so there's a lot of data head lifting that has to be done in order to do it. But now you asked the question, Brian, where does the future go for this? Oh, by the way, I just wanted to mention that I personally built over 1,000 looks in Looker from 2015 until 2022 when I left LifeAid, and those are still in use today. They're scheduled by email, they run automatically, and they are distributed to the people who need that information. And then, so anyway, I have a lot of experience with this, but what's really happening, especially for smaller companies, is that you've got LLM-based tools with code interpreter or advanced data analytics, where if your data is still in spreadsheets, you can just give those spreadsheets to advanced data analytics, and it will give you natural language analysis of what it sees in that data. And that just stops all of that, which I just described as the sort of the pipeline and, deliberate effort that's required to actually take advantage of a business intelligence system in enterprise. So good news, the future of AI, in answer to your question, Brian, is there's going to be a lot of systems where you can just upload the data, and without articulating the things that you have to in order to lay out that data in a structured query, in effect, you're going to just be able to say, what's going on here? And it'll come back and tell you, and then you can ask follow-up questions to that data. That's really the holy grail of business intelligence is, look at all my data, please, and tell me what's going on.
Right. There's one issue I have with that, and it's not, well, we're finding it a big problem in ours, is that every single SaaS tool is adding some sort of AI component to do that. So you've got Gong that does that. You've got Outreach that does that. You've got HubSpot that does that. You've got Salesforce that does that. We've got Looker that does that. So every single piece. And the question now is, how do we capture all of it? Because you can't use the AI tool in one unless you push the data into another. So it's like push Outreach into Salesforce or whatever it is, right? So to me, there still needs some sort of can you get something that overlooks everything else? Now, a lot of companies can say they can do that, but no company I've ever seen has ever done that. They've never, or at least an enterprise level wide, they're like, oh, we're just going to use this tool that manages all the other tools. It never happens. I remember Power BI used to do that. Tableau used to do that, but like, you're still going to pull, like you're going to have people who are pulling reports from just individuals because they trust it a lot more and when they put it through. So it's still, to me, a challenge. And unless there's a company that can do that and integrate it, there's still a little bit of silos there. And that's what I was kind of worried about when I saw all these companies attaching an AI component into their system. It's like, great, I can now natural language query that system, but I'd like to natural language query my entire business, not language, not query 6 different tools and kind of like, how do I do that? Right? Like, how do I query one that goes into other? And Beth, that's, to me, that's where an agent probably is the best thing, where it can go into all of these and just come back with something. Because I don't know how you solve the siloed datas. The
answer that Looker provides to that is that you have to put them all into a single database. And those things are automatic, right? I haven't been at LifeAid for a year, but all of those things are just happening automatically. They're every day, every new piece of data in every one of those silos is going into a central SQL database, and that's Looker database, right? So it happens, but it's a requirement of the organization to tie those things together. It's not yet, I think you're right, Carl, it's a challenge. It's not yet available that you say, okay, I'm buying this tool. It's going to go out and find everything that I have. You have to tell it what you've got, and then you've got to create an ETL path from that one system over to the central store.
And that's where tools like Snowflake have been, like not tools, but a software like Snowflake. And they're not the only ones. They rose to prominence in the time that I was working in BI and stuff. But, when you start to get to these bigger data lakes and these tools that are like a Zapier, where it can go out and connect to multiple tools and bring that data into a data lake or a data warehouse. And then your analytics tools can go and grab from not just Snowflake and what is there, but maybe Kubernetes or maybe a Spark or different, data warehouse, depending on where it is, or maybe it's even local files too. That's, Carl, to like my answer to what you're saying is, because you're right. Like the fear is, oh, I'm in Gong and I can see Gong data, but this is my viewpoint. It's Gong data in that tool.
Yeah.
And now I start making business decisions based off of how my calls are going, right? What Gong might be helping you out with, that don't accurately reflect the entire business problem. You just have a very limited scope, and you're thinking, well, now we're going to start making strategic business decisions and shift this way because the Gong dashboards are showing us that this is a problem. But if you don't layer in some of the other overlapping data, you definitely are having a reduced vision of what maybe the entire problem is, and there may be other factors at play that are much more important than whatever the limited view is. So I agree with you. It's I think you bring up a valid point. My point is that as more tools are able to quickly stand up AI dashboards, which they are, we see it everywhere. Like every single website promotes it now. Is that necessarily a good thing if what it creates is 15 different views of 15 different silo pieces for that particular piece? It has its use cases, but that's not going to help a business make strategic, maybe more global decisions based off of that data.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to jump from descriptive, which is what we've been talking about now, getting your data together and allowing a system that can create visualizations that describes what's going on up to the moment, to predictive. Now, I never implemented anything predictive using Looker, but I'm sure they have tools that will assist in doing. But one of the things that is possible with AI that wasn't possible before is ingesting an enormous and sort of amount of data. And I'm going to give you an example. So at Life Aid, a consumer products goods company, it's a beverage. We have access to a subscription from companies like IRI, Nielsen, or Spins that gives us the data for every single competitor across every banner of distribution that you subscribe to. And it can be very expensive, $150,000 a year to have this feed of data once a month that tells you everybody's sales by product, by banner being like a grocery chain. So I know what they're selling in that chain, Walmart or food or whatever. Now, there's a lot of competitors out there. The list is very long. And always that landscape is changing. A new product comes on the shelf and starts to take share from the rest. And then this one's kind of flagging because it's being overcome by the power of marketing from another major product and with a new product claim and so on. So there's a lot of migration of shares in that data. That's really hard to see. It's very hard to look at a huge list of products and say, okay, well, how's this one doing right now? And what was it doing 6 months ago? And what's changed that product? AI can do that. If you give it the longitudinal data for all of the months that preceded, for all of these competitors and all these locations, and just say, I want you to predict. It's not a large language model that does this, by the way. It's a different kind of AI, and it's a predictive kind of AI. And specifically, the one that I determined would be capable of doing this is an algorithm called gradient boosted trees. So that's an AI model that can do this kind of very large scale predictive analytics. And what you could do then is you could say, chart out for me, at least to the horizon that's relevant, like say 6 months, what the market shares in this grocery chain are going to be based on what you see happening. And it looks back over all this data, and it's inestimable and non-transparent way. It says, here's what's going to happen. And it can be very, very informative and accurate. It would have given us a lot of information if we had that at Life Aid about what was happening in the market share changes in our category, which would say energy drinks, for example. And that is the power of BI at another level. And it's made possible by the ability of AI systems to understand and then fashion a model in its own inner workings that will say, this is what's going to happen in the future. That's predictive analytics with AI.
Right. I think that's a great way to say it. And I would say, as we're sort of like wrapping up today, what can businesses do to be better prepared in 2024? And first and foremost, I would say have visibility of all your data sources. What's coming in? What do you have access to? Do you understand what's coming in? I always found that it was common knowledge that it was never a lack of data, never a lack of data. It was always the opposite. It was always too much data. And so there was delusions of data coming in, and how do you manage that? The other thing I would say too is, it's going back to several years ago, what we would often find with companies, and they would spend a lot of money going through this process, was they didn't actually know what they wanted to know. They didn't go through the process internally to say, if we had this thing built, no restrictions, if we had this thing built for us, what answers would it provide us that would be valuable for us to then, to your point, Andy, be able to extrapolate 6 months and see a projected chart that tells us this thing? And if we get that answer, what could we do with our business that would actually make a valuable impact on it? And I found
I can tell you one, which is almost every consumer packaged good and any other manufacturing company needs to modify their supply chain to produce the correct amount of inventory in future periods. And the biggest risk to a company like that is, I overbuilt because my prediction for what was going to be sold in those future periods was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll get to you guys as we sort of wrap up, and Greg's left us 2 comments too, which we'll get to in a second. But, look, we didn't really get into it in this conversation, but obviously data governance is something we can come back to. AI governance, not just data governance, but AI governance, and how that interplays with business intelligence in the future. How businesses are going to not only have to look at data governance, but also what is their AI governance policies? How does it interact with how people internally work with that data in order to get these solutions down the road? I think it's going to be a massive thing. So we can talk about that in another conversation. But, what's your guys' take on this as far as how can businesses, amplify their business intelligence with AI as you see it in 2024?
So I'm going to start with training, right? There's in many ways, I'm going to start with have a conversation and then train. So find out what data you're capturing now. Have conversations with people about what would they, if they could wave a magic wand, what would the data tell them? Because that will give you some information about whether you're collecting enough or whether it's clean enough. And I can tell you that Salesforce has a training thing, trailhead.salesforce.com, totally free. You can learn all kinds of stuff. You can learn basic data analytics. If you want to learn about Tableau, you can learn that. You can learn about Einstein's next best action kind of predictive. I know Salesforce has that. I'm certain HubSpot does too. But also I would expect that Looker has something. And these other, Greg is talking about Yellowfin. Most of these capabilities have free training, and the free training includes a fundamentals foundation. So take advantage of that. Find the one that you want to use as a company, and reward your employees for becoming more data literate.
One thing that I would suggest too is if you are brand new to this, you have your systems of reporting, whether it's, annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, whatever that is. If you want to start, maybe the first step is to take your quarterly reports and feed that in, again, privacy aware, but feed that into a large language model and ask it questions. Maybe just take your quarterly report, a public quarterly report, and ask the questions to give you an understanding, especially the ones who are be focused on it, your finance teams, your accountants, your CFO, for them to actually ask against it, and then start maybe helping them hey, why don't you think about questions to help you plan for the next quarter or for the next annual? And I think that kind of thing will open the minds and get the gears going just a little bit, because it's hard to be we need to start adding these things and letting AI just that's a big leap for a lot of people, right? From going from writing an email to actually report planning. So it's more of that business. It's like, stop thinking about AI as a content generation tool. Now start thinking of it as your business intelligence tool and start using it that way.
Nice.
Yeah, smart point. Jimmy or Andy, wrap it up.
Yeah, I would just, as just a quick point, I'd say don't undervalue simulated data as well, especially if you're dipping your toe into the AI world. It solves a lot of, and we'll discuss this in another episode, but a lot of data governance questions and things like that. So if you're transitioning to adding AI as part of your business or part of your data handling processes, you can experiment with the simulated data. So that I think will give you a step up and increase your data literacy, and like Beth was saying, supercharge your training methods.
Yeah,
I'll say that if you're in an organization that has one of these major BI systems, whether it's Power BI or Looker or Tableau, there's probably an already existing pipeline of delivery of important business intelligence for your function. But there's also something that probably hasn't been distributed widely yet, which is direct user access to natural language queries into the data. Go find out if that's available. And if it is, be one of the first to start to ask the data department for that access and start to play with that. Did you want to hit Greg's comments? Yeah.
Yes, I do. I'll let me hit him real quick because I do appreciate, Greg, you being on the show and listening in. Greg's always bringing great comments, so I appreciate it, Greg. But he was talking about Yellowfin. Don't require you to move the data. It goes to the source systems and runs queries, then just brings the results into the main system. Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely solutions like that. I agree, Greg. A great point out on that it doesn't always necessarily mean that the company has to export and then import. In some cases, it can literally just go and grab the live data and do refreshes at this point, live data is probably refreshes every 15 minutes, right? Something like that. And then you had another. I
actually think Greg there is talking about not the normal cron transport, but you write a query in Yellowfin, and if it doesn't have the data, it's going to go out and look for it. Right, which is a little different than being able to query only what's already in the central data store.
Right. Yeah, it'll go grab it in the system. So if it's Gong, it goes and grabs it directly from Gong, and then you're just querying or talking about the data in the main system, but it's pulling the data from like a Gong or something like that. And then in Beth's comment about data literacy, which I 100% agree with, he was saying low data literacy is solved by human in the loop processes where the data teams can develop the self-service parameters, but still leave dimension control to the end user. So rather than limit just by security or access group, which are sort of like the main ways they would do, you might be limiting based on what the data makes sense to be viewed together, which I agree with as well. And that was a big part of what we used to work with, is how do you put the right data in front of the person without, because just as dangerous as putting too much data in front of end users. It would absolutely push them in the wrong direction. You're trying to get data literacy and they go, whoa, and then they're gone, and you don't get the adoption rates, which are really, really tough to do for end users who aren't used to doing this every single day. So lots here. We could dig into this even more.
And don't put your payroll information into your data store. Keep that separate.
always a good tip. Anything HR related, usually not solid to put in there. Hey, listen, I know we went over on this one, but here's what we got coming up the rest of the week. Tomorrow, we're talking about AI's revolution in gaming, crafting unique player experiences. I know nothing about that, so I will be listening to Jimmy and everybody else who does. So that's going to be exciting. Wednesday, we talk about the news. Thursday, rethinking college. Will AI disrupt traditional education? And Friday is show 100 for us. So we'll be kind of having a fun one. We always have fun, but it'll be show 100 on Friday. Hopefully the whole gang will be able to make it. We're going to be reflecting back on our first 100 shows, some of our favorites, maybe some of the ones that went off the rails. Who knows? It'll be fun on Friday. So come back all week, and we will be here next week as well. So if you're wondering, are we taking time off for the holidays? Some of us will be here Christmas on through next week. So come join us for the next 2 weeks to finish out the year. and learn all sorts of fun stuff with us about AI. So hopefully you learned something today or got some aha ideas, and we will see you guys back tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Let me find my splash screen.
Damn it.